And my father took me to different hospitals and all the rest of it. I had barium meals and, oh, there's nothing wrong with you. We can't find anything. There's nothing there. And literally, I would say a month to 6 weeks after I started keto, it gone, disappeared.
Ben, how did you find the carnivore diet?
Strange. Two things. My wife always likes to take a Christmas picture. And in, I guess it was Christmas 2020, she took the picture and decided she was going to frame it. I saw it and I was absolutely gutted how big I was. And immediately it was a case of, I need to do something about this. And the funny thing was, this was right at the beginning of some very extreme lockdowns here in the Philippines. And I'd had a guy I was working with that was keto. I noticed he'd lost a huge amount of weight. And, you know, it was just a passing interest. How did you do that? Blah, blah, blah. And he sort of gave me the basics. But when I saw that picture, I looked up keto on the internet, on YouTube. And from the beginning of January, I was looking at these videos. I was procrastinating like an idiot. I was watching Ken Berry, I was watching Barcade, I was watching some of the other keto guys. I don't recall all the names. And I was just procrastinating through the first couple of weeks of January. And there was one video that Ken Berry put out, and he said, just do it. And this was on the 23rd of January 2021. So I went to the kitchen, looked at what was in the fridge. There was some ground pork in there. There was a couple of cabbages. And that's what I ate for dinner. I haven't looked back since. That's how I discovered it.
You started keto and then transitioned through into carnivore, or are you still keto now?
No, I'm not keto now. Yeah, I started, I was 8 months. I was keto. But that was very meat heavy. I'm a big meat eater. So it was, over half the plate of meat with, a side of green vegetables or something, a bit of cauliflower or whatever. I'm right now, I eat right across the spectrum. I'll eat a bit of keto. I'll come back to that in a sec. I eat a lot of keto. I would say I'm predominantly ketovore. Much like yourself, I live certainly 4 or 5 days a week. I eat just ground beef and eggs. Typically, 1 meal a day. I'll have that about 6 o'clock because I also prepare. I'm the cook in the family, so I prepare food for the family. And it's the one point when the kids get home from school and everything that I can sit down and actually have a meal with the family. So meat and eggs in the evenings. Sometimes I can feel I'm getting a bit hungry at about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'll have a bowl of eggs, 6 eggs or whatever, just to settle my stomach down. And then I'll have the ground meat with a few more eggs later in the evening. Yesterday, as an example, I'll tell you about this as well. We've got a meat market, a wet market, about 3 kilometres from the house, where the wife does most of the shopping. And it's not the best quality, but it's local beef, pork, fish, all the rest of it. As a situary, I live in Subic, which is right on the coast. So we get a lot of fresh seafood and that sort of thing here. So the wife will get, for instance, yesterday she bought some beef ribs home, tough as old boots, boiled them up with a bit of onion and garlic, let them boil for, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours. Meat fell off the bone, and I ate the beef, a big bowl of meat with the broth, obviously, for dinner. So it did have a bit of pepper in it, it did have a bit of garlic, did have a bit of onion. But that's how I typically eat. Sometimes I'll do an omelette, and that'll have a little bit of onion and garlic in it for some flavour. I was huge and a huge foodie, so I do miss flavours a little bit. But it's amazing. I think you've spoken about it yourself, how your palate changes and you really get to enjoy the flavour of single whole food, beef and chicken and pork and that sort of stuff. So, yeah, started keto, 8 months, very strict, no alcohol, no nothing. Sat in my arm, as I pointed out in one of your messages, sat in my armchair. It was the beginning of lockdown. I was very lucky because it was lockdown. And here in the Philippines, only one person was allowed to leave the house with a special pass to do the shopping and all that sort of thing. So I had absolutely no deterrents. I had no obstacles. I was just sat in the house watching Ken Berry, etc. And I lost 66 pounds, 30 kilos in the first 8 months, just sitting in the armchair watching TV, because there's nothing else that I could do. I was doing a little bit of work online. I'm semi-retired. So I was doing a little bit of work online, sat in front of a computer. But yeah, down 30 kilos, loads of other things improved. We can go through those if you want. And after the first 8 months, I then sort of loosened it up a little bit. I started playing with carnivore. But as a lot of people have said, and I've noticed in Facebook groups, etc., a lot of people automatically transition across the spectrum from keto to carnivore. So, to cut a long story short, I'm pretty much keto carnivore these days. I certainly don't eat the vegetables that I used to, not at all. It's there for flavour and maybe a little bit of crunch or something like that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and that certainly is my feeling. You know, it just becomes almost a natural transition, and
Sure.
yeah, like you say, you start getting the real kind of appreciation of those single foods,
Oh,
right?
without a
And
shadow of a
more and
doubt.
more, you know.
Absolutely,
A-
yes.
And when someone's first getting started with this, or they're even just considering it, the thing they'd be worried about, what about variety? What about all the tastes? And what about all the different things? And from their perspective, I understand that perspective because that's where I was as well. But
Right.
everything changes once you get to this point, right? Once you're on this kind of way of eating.
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, when I
Mm.
first started, I was trying to. The biggest mistake that I made, and I think a lot of other people go through this as well. I was trying to replace foods. So I was making like mug bread, so I could have I make a beef patty and try and have a burger, with a slice of lettuce and a piece of tomato in it, or something like that. And it took me a while to appreciate the food that I was eating. And it was, I don't know, it was maybe a year ago. I just said, I don't need to replace, just eat and enjoy single whole foods. And that's where I've been for about the last year. It took me a while to get there, but I did get there.
About the last year, kind of keto carnivore, and basically keto since January 23, 2020.
Sorry, January 2021 is when,
2021.
23rd of January 2021 is the day that I
2021.
took Ken Berry's advice and just do it.
Mm. So 66 pounds down.
Yeah.
What other changes have you seen in that time?
Oh, ridiculous. The main one for me is that I had 40 years of IBS. My life revolved around it. I had to get up 2 or 3 hours early before I was confident to leave the house because of multiple bowel movements and pain and all the rest of it. As a young man, in my very early 20s, I was suffering from this. And my father took me to different hospitals and all the rest of it. I had barium meals and, oh, there's nothing wrong with you. We can't find anything. There's nothing there. And literally I would say a month to 6 weeks after I started keto, it gone, disappeared. It took me a few weeks, a couple of months after that, to realise I could get up, go out, didn't have to revolve my life around finding toilets and making sure. I'll give you an idea. As I say, I was I was raised on the east coast of Essex, and I used to work in the city of London. That was an hour and 45-minute trip. It was the scariest thing for me to go to a station, get on that train, and travel for 1 hour, 45 minutes without a toilet. In fact, I would not get on a train if there wasn't a toilet cubicle on the carriage I was on. I was so scared of my guts that I lost jobs because of it. I lost 2 or 3 jobs just because I was not on time. I wasn't reliable. But 6 weeks after starting, gone, absolutely gone. I wasn't expecting that. I hadn't researched it. Research is the wrong word. I hadn't done any homework and come across anything that would suggest that keto carnivore would help that. And all of a sudden, I don't want to get into too much detail, but everything down below there was all working properly. It was how it should be. Thank God for that. So IBS was the main benefit that I initially found. Next one, I'd had heartburn for, I don't know, 20 years, certainly decades. And that's disappeared as well. I used to take 1 or 2 Nexium every day. I take 1 in a while now. You know, I've got a pot there that I've had in my drawer for about a year and it's still 3/4 full. Heartburn. Probably one that my wife likes the best is my testosterone went through the roof. So, you know, I wasn't interested in the bedroom and all the rest of it for quite a while. Now she has to beat me off with a wet stick. Testosterone's gone up. Obviously losing, again, I have to go back to Ken Berry that explained about fatty tongue. I don't snore anymore. Again, another thing that the wife likes. I'm trying to think what else. I had skin rashes and stuff on my hands. That's all gone. That's a minor thing, but that's gone. Joint pain. I still it's not something that's going to get cured or reversed by this way of eating. But I've got osteoporosis in my lower spine, L3, L4, L5, and I don't have anywhere near as much back pain as I used to. I can't bend over and lift heavy things, but I can sit in a chair and not suffer with any pain or anything like that. So that's another thing that's happened. Obviously, all my blood work has pretty much in the normal range. When I originally started, I had high blood pressure. I had fatty liver. What else? High blood pressure, fatty liver. Yeah, and obviously I was I was 30 kilos overweight. That disappeared in the first few weeks. Certainly by the end of the 8 months when I got checked up, it had all gone. So if I remember anything else during our conversation, I'll bring it up. But that's what I can remember for the time being.
Sure, awesome. So I just wanted to ask you a little bit more about the testosterone first. So
Yeah.
Obviously with the increased testosterone, the libido is better. Have you noticed anything else that the testosterone might be related to, like increased testosterone, maybe mood enhancement or anything like that?
Oh, perfect. If you know, I don't know whether you are on any of the Facebook groups or elsewhere, but I use the handle Grumpy Old Ben. Looking back, I was obnoxious. I I'd go through the roof with anger, spike, come straight back down again. I'm just laid back and cool now. That has changed completely. Yeah, my mood is a lot more accommodating. It's a lot more stable and flat now. But you mentioned that. That just reminded me. Right at the beginning of lockdown, it was super deep here. And in fact, it was my parents, it was my family that recognised that I was really depressed. Didn't want to talk to anybody, locked myself away in my den, watching my videos and all the rest of it. And yeah, certainly during that 8-month period, I would say half of that, maybe 4 months, I lost that depression completely. I didn't leave the house for 5 months. Not even to go outside in the garden or go around the village where I lived for a walk or anything like that. I just didn't leave the house. Now, I've only recently just started, about 18 months ago, I started walking round the village. We live in a gated community here. It's huge, but I can go out. So I did 7 kilometres yesterday, just walking around the village, getting a little bit of exercise and stuff. I wasn't doing any. I was just so depressed. I didn't recognise it. Didn't recognise it at all. But towards the end of it, my wife's a first responder here. So the biggest thing for her was how quickly my blood pressure went down. And I'm doing very well, apparently, according to the doc. I'm doing very well for my age. I'm 59 years old. And I'm well within range there. That's not really testosterone, but it's part of the whole process. So mood, yes. Anxiety, depression, gone. I'm back to my old self.
Just to explore the depression side of things a little bit more, do you think the depression was that something that was driven by the lockdowns, or is that something you think you've always been prone to and perhaps the lockdown situation just made it worse or exacerbated it?
Yeah, the lockdown was the catalyst. But mood and certainly anxiety, that was partly because of the IBS and all the rest of it. That all sort of dovetails into it. But yeah, at the end of the day, I put it down to just eating better, fixing all of that together. But yeah, the lockdown is certainly the catalyst. But prior to that, as you sort of indicate there, the way you allude to it, I was not a good person in that respect. Very moody.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's enough said there.
So you mentioned the doctor said everything's all good. So does your doctor know the way you're eating, and if so, what does your doctor think about that?
Yeah, he's keto.
Okay.
Actually, I don't go to a doctor here. The quality of medicine here is very old-fashioned, extremely poor. I've never felt. The last time I went to a doctor here was when I had a case of what do you call it? Lung infection. About 15 years ago. That was the last time I went to a doctor. I've got an American guy here that's got a lab in town. He does blood work. He's not a practitioner. He and his wife, Filipino wife, they were licensed practitioners, but the guidelines and everything here, they just can't work with it. So they do blood works and offer advice, but they're not practicing doctors anymore. They're not practicing MDs. So I use them for anything that I need. But as I just said, they're both keto.
Right. Okay. And how has your wife and family taken to this as far as are they doing it with you, or are they just supportive of you, or are they kind of like, well, we're happy that your mood's improved, but other than that, we're backing away slowly? What's
Yeah, this seems very, very, very common with a lot of people, as we've seen with a lot of people. One person doing keto carnivore in the family, and the rest of them not. My wife expounds on my behalf. She's very proud of what I've achieved. As I say, she's a first responder, so she's with large groups of people regularly. Doing mountaineering and all this sort of thing. So she teaches first aid, she teaches survival, all the rest of it. But she's a very slender, very sexy Filipina. So she doesn't see it in the same way as I do. She doesn't see it as necessary. However, the two teenagers I've got in the house here, they're sort of partly forced into some aspects of it because I'm the cook. I prepare the food. So where I would do, say, a spaghetti bolognese, they'll still have the spaghetti bolognese, but the sauce for the ground beef is completely keto. I've cut out all the sugary sauces and all the rest of it, and I'll just use some fresh tomatoes or whatever. So they're sort of drawn into it to a certain extent. I can have some of the sauce if I wanted to, and sometimes I do. I've been in maintenance for a couple of years now, so I tend to, I wouldn't say fast and loose, but I do eat across the spectrum. Most of the time, as I explained earlier, I'll have beef and eggs. But if I make a nice bolognese sauce, then I'll have half a bowl of it with some eggs, no problem at all. But I have noticed, certainly with my daughter, she's off to medical school next year. So she sort of listens. I show her some videos. Certainly, what's his name, Paul Mason, that does a lot of the lectures and stuff. I'll set her down with me, and she'll watch it, and she takes interest in that. But the point I was going to make is I've noticed they'll take their rations, big plate of rice, and I've noticed now that they're scraping more than half of it back into the rice bowl because they know the carbs are not good for them, etc., etc. So they're coming round. They're not there yet, but they're coming round. My wife, no, not interested at all. As a side note, I've got a 28-year-old daughter from a previous marriage. She lives in Columbus, Ohio, and she was over here visiting me in February, and she was having some lady problems, and she's obviously been on board. I talk to her 2 or 3 times a week. She understands what I've done, and she's said, will any of this help my problems? She had PCOS. This was in February. And about a week ago, after following I sort of helped. She wasn't completely ketovore, but she was very close. Call it ketovore with a few little hiccups, a few little noodles here and there once in a while. But she was very, very close to ketovore. And she told me last week, 10 days ago, that she can now make me a granddaddy. Her PCOS has reversed since February. So I still think
that's awesome.
I'm only 59. I still think I'm a bit young to be a granddad, but good luck to her.
That's awesome. That's really good.
Yeah, very pleased.
Yeah, nice. And I mean, even the thing is, when you talk about your wife is kind of not interested and whatever, and that's she's doing awesome. That she's slender, as you said. That's great, but the good thing is you're kind of leading by example, so that
Sure.
if she ever finds herself in a situation later in life where she's kind of putting a little bit of weight on that she's not happy about, she knows what she can do, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Because
Yeah,
she's seen you doing it.
But I was brought up, I was born in the early mid-60s, out on the east coast of Essex, farmland. I worked in an abattoir during the summer school holidays, and my parents or were, I've lost them both, they were very Victorian in their sort of outlook. Grew up during the Second World War in London. Food was fairly scarce, blah, blah, blah. We never had processed food in the house. It was always meat and 2 veg. The biggest problem for there was bread on the table, there was margarine on the table, sauces had sugar in it, blah, 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 but it was whole food. Similar sort of thing where we are here is processed food. It's crazy. Let me go back just a little bit. I spent a lot of time prior to coming to the Philippines in 2004. Oh, Christ, that's nearly 20 years ago. I spent a number of years in Thailand. And when I first went to Thailand in the very early 90s, I'm only 5'6". I would walk around in Bangkok, and I was one of the tallest people there. Everybody was smaller than me, believe it or not. Oh, you probably experienced similar things in Japan. I could walk down a busy high street and look over the top of everybody. That has completely changed because they've got McDonald's, they've got Subway, they've got all the fast food there now since the early 90s. They're growing taller, but they're a hell of a lot bigger, fatter. And that's similar to what we've got here in the Philippines. But again, my wife being a little bit older, she was brought up on just going to the local wet market, getting vegetables and meat, and then they'll make their different soups and all the rest of it. So outside of low carb, outside of keto carnivore, she eats what you could call relatively healthy. But yeah, long story short, at the end of the journey, if she does find that she's not fit and healthy, she certainly knows. I can't stop talking. That's bad for you. That's bad for you. Why are you eating that? She certainly knows what should be on her menu.
It's interesting you talk about the Philippines and Thailand like that, because yeah, that's very similar to what's happening in Japan. You know, the people are getting taller. Even in the 17 years that I've been here, I noticed differences. But you know, yeah, they're also filling out the other way too.
Sure.
And it's just the influence of, I guess it's. You know, the regular diet, but now it's being combined very heavily with the Western standard diet, you know, and no one's body can compete with that, you know.
Sure, without a shadow of a doubt. It's something that I've seen different ideas put forth, different theories put forward, why Asians lived for thousands of years on a rice-based diet and didn't get big. I'm sure it's partly genes, genetics, blah, blah, blah. But now adding the additional food into that, you know, rice and 2 veg, relatively healthy diet, they're just ballooning. I spent, I don't know, 18 months, 2 years working in Indonesia on and off. Same thing there. It must, and you're saying about Japan, it must be Asia-wide that we're seeing. I did 10 years in the Middle East, from sort of 1989 through to exactly 2000, and diabetes and everything there is absolutely rife. I think it's one of the worst countries or the worst regions in the world from what I read and what I understand, for diabetes and stuff. You could 20 years ago, 30 years ago now, kids had diabetes. I know that's becoming more prevalent in the West now, but even 30 years ago, in the Middle East they had diabetes. But it's terrible that the West has got into this region so heavily with their fast food and everything.
I heard some of the reasoning about the Middle East from Dr. Robert Lustig in one of his talks, and
Okay.
he was talking about how um, the Middle East, soda is really big, that like
Oh,
cola and stuff like
Bibsy.
that's really big. The issue with the soda, as opposed to, I guess, what we'd do in a Western country, we'd be like, drinking alcohol as a reward for, a long day, or, the end of the week or whatever. And their reward is the soda. But
Ah, okay.
alcohol is self-limiting, right? Because you're going to be under the table at some point, right? Whereas
Sure.
you can't drink anymore. Soda's not like that. So that's why the diabetes has, become like this tidal wave over there.
That's a good call, that actually.
Mm.
I used to look after, in my previous life, I was a computer engineer. And I used to look after the computer systems at Bahrain University. And you go into the canteen or the food areas, um, if you were doing a long job and you needed a break. So there's no Coke, or there wasn't any at that time. There was no Coke in the Middle East, Jewish owned. So it was all Bibsy. They call soda Bibsy because they don't have a P in the language. So instead of saying Pepsi, they call it Bibsy.
Ah,
So every soda in the Middle East is Bibsy. And you're right. If I went into that canteen, there was just cans on every single table. I've never considered that. That's a good call, Matt. I do follow Robert Lustig, but I don't recall seeing that particular video.
so off the topic of keto and carnivore, just talking about your life generally, you seem to have traveled a lot.
Yeah, yeah,
What
yeah.
what was the reasoning? What was the reasoning for that?
I left the UK when I was 26 years old. Long story short, my older brother was a civil engineer in the Middle East, and I used to go and visit him once in a while. And the computer company that I worked for, it's dead and buried now. I'm old. Was a company called Digital Equipment, second largest company after IBM worldwide. And
DEC.
sorry, DEC, yes. Yeah, I was a systems engineer for DEC. I did a lot of training as well, teaching. So they used to get me out to Germany, Holland, around Europe doing some training. My brother knew, purely because he knew I worked for DEC. He knew the DEC people in Bahrain, and he mentioned I was struggling. He knew, not many people knew, but he knew that I was struggling with travelling into London and all the rest of it. And he basically found me an opportunity in Bahrain. So I was only travelling in a car for 10 minutes from home to office. So I left London, started working for DEC in Bahrain. I was the only guy in Bahrain that had a formal DEC background. So based on that, I was sort of well known, if that's good enough. I was well known around the Gulf. So I did a lot of work in Egypt. I did some work during the Gulf War in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. And there, obviously, I was dealing with a lot of Americans. I was working on the US Navy base in Bahrain. And I went off to the States for a couple of years. I worked over in Mountain View in California. Came back to Bahrain after I'd done my stuff there. Yeah, that's the story. The sort of first half of the story. I got out of computing eventually. I continued with the teaching side of it, and because of the change in business and the dynamics there, I got myself into looking after networks in call centres, and obviously they're prevalent here in the Philippines. So I got involved with computer networks and audio video networks for the Philippines. Did that for a few years and ended up within the same industry, starting to teach English to the, as I've got a bit older and I can't bend under the tables running cables and stuff anymore. I was asked, with a training background, with a teaching background, they asked me to start teaching the Filipinos that were applying for the call centre work, slang English or Australian or wherever they're calling, Kiwis, obviously, to understand the slang, how to pronounce words a little bit better, and all the rest of it. So that's what I do part time now. So that's what got me travelling.
So when you said your friend knew you were struggling, and that's how you got the struggling to travel into London, and that's how he found you the job in Bahrain. So is that your IBS literally got you to Bahrain? Is that wow?
100%, 100%.
Yeah,
he's
kind of full circle, kind of.
Sure. Yeah, that's huge benefit, and right time, right place, and all the rest of it. Yeah, it's as I say, only my brother knew. Anybody, I was embarrassed about it. Girlfriends and stuff like that back in the day didn't even know. I would say I put it down to the osteoporosis that I've got in my bad back. I can't move. Blah blah blah. It's. I look back on it now and think, what a silly Billy. I would use a stronger word if we weren't on here, but I was stupid not to talk out about this. That is something that I'll use as advice for anybody that listens to me these days is tell the truth. If you've got a problem, talk about it. But when you're in your late teens and early 20s, it's not, where's the nearest toilet? I've got a bad tummy and all the rest of it. It's not something you really want to talk to anybody about.
Yeah.
But only my father.
Yeah, it's so self-conscious, right?
Sure, good call. Yeah, self-conscious and embarrassing. So I would use my back, which everybody knew I had a bad back. I would use that as the excuse rather than talking about a bad tummy. But yeah, it was just my brother. My parents knew. That was it. No, I'd never.
So,
now we're talking. That's really interesting. Now we're talking about it. I'd never really put the emphasis on that connection between my brother knowing I had bad guts, although it was there. I mean, as bright as the sun is outside the house at the moment, it's there. But I'd never really brought it down to that level. Thank you.
No worries. So, like, where does this go for you now? Are you is this the diet for you forever now?
I'm done. Yeah, absolutely. I am a bit naughty with it. I am a bit lazy with it. I do have a couple of days off a week. A couple of days off a month, where I'll go into town here, meet up with a load of friends, and I'll have a few beers. Typically, I'll have a couple of whiskies, and so I do still drink alcohol. I'll go and have a few drinks, but other than that, no. I'm comfortable. It works. I've got no. I do get cravings. I do get cravings, but they're easy to handle now. It's Christmas. I'll have a week off at Christmas. I have done for the last 2 or 3 years. I'll have a week off at Christmas. It's tradition in the family that my boy, over the last 10 years, he's made the mince pies, the fruit mince pies, for those that don't know what they are. He makes those for Christmas, and I'm not going to miss out on mince pies at Christmas. I will have my full Christmas dinner with the family. I'll have my roast potatoes. I'll have my Brussels sprouts, very traditional for a Brit. So I'm not going to miss out on that. But this is the week. It's Christmas to New Year. I'll go out and celebrate New Year. Last 2 years, I've done immediately after New Year. Which I've done, as I say, last 2 years. I'll have a plate full of eggs, and then I'll fast for 72 hours to get me to try and get myself back on track, and away we go again. I'm quite lucky in that respect. That I was watching Carnivore Kip yesterday, and he said he fell off the wagon and struggled with cravings and stuff to get back on again. He went to a big city, and it was all there in front of him. I've just got that sort of constitution, that sort of mental ability where that doesn't bother me. I'll choose to go off. It's my choice. I haven't slipped, and I know how detrimental it is, and I'll live with that for a week and get back on it. In fact, right now, when after the first 8 months of keto, I got myself from 94 kilos down to 63. That was the lowest weight I went to. My body feels the most comfortable at around 65. But unfortunately, I've got a set point. You hear the doctors and stuff talking about set point. I've got a set point where my body tries to creep up to about 68, 69 kilos. Right now I'm 68. I'm a little bit podgy around the face, so I've got to work over. I went round and put a swimming pool in for a friend yesterday, and he gave me a couple of whiskies. So while we were putting the pool up, so I'll need to work to get those 2 or 3 kilos off back down to where I want to be. But that's the only fight that I've got these days is between 65 and 68 kilos. But I can manage that. Yeah, you got me on a bad day.
It's interesting it's interesting you mentioned those numbers, because that's probably what it is for me too. I feel most comfortable about 65.
Sure.
And yeah, but I do feel that my body wants to get me to about 68, 69.
Sure. Yeah. I've been
yeah.
like that for the last 9 months or so. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm assuming you must be a similar height to me then.
5'8". So we're pretty close.
A couple of inches taller.
So do you have a YouTube channel where people can get in contact with you? Or an Instagram or anything?
No, I'm just a lurker, and I contribute to a couple of Facebook groups, Carnivore Quest and Carnivorous Community. That's about it. But I will tell you, an exclusive for you. You were saying earlier about where this is going for me. I'm in the process of putting together a plan with one of my old bosses. We're going to put a keto cafe up in the local town, where whereby we'll hopefully get started in the next, I don't know, 3-4 months. Just a small place. He owns a gym, and this is to sort of go in tandem with his gym. That we'll put a keto cafe up near the gym, where people can come in for a bit of kitchen instruction. I'll use my teaching there, sort of some culinary stuff in the kitchen, but obviously an operational cafe where you can come in for your coffee and your drinks and keto prepped snacks and food. Not sure how well it's going to work yet, but we've noticed that there are a lot of oversized, let's put it politely, very young. I don't know about Japan, but it's a very young country here. And there's a lot of people in their 20s, 30s here that are trying all the stupid things to lose weight, and there are 2 or 3, I wouldn't say well-known, but very evident keto Filipinos on YouTube. I watch them sometimes, but they tend to speak a lot of Tagalog, and my my understanding and ability to use the local language is limited, so I can't follow what they're saying. But they're there. They're there. It's not huge. It's a very old, as I said earlier, very old medicine here. Style of medicine is certainly 70s, 80s.
Yeah.
And all that goes with that. But
Yeah.
no, no YouTube. I'm on a couple of Facebook groups, as I mentioned. I'm not an influencer. I'm a lurker.
So, Ben, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your journey. I really appreciate it.